Chapter 1. Roots in Tábua. The sunrise painted the sky over Tábua in shades of pink and orange, as the first light of day gently touched the hills surrounding the parish of Tábua, a small village nestled between mountains and the sea, which seemed to be slowly awakening from its nightly slumber. The houses, modest and built from volcanic stone, were arranged in irregular rows along narrow dirt streets. These roads were lined with levadas, an ingenious system of water channels used to transport water from the mountainous areas and wells to the drier farmlands of the island. The paths wound between cultivated fields and small plots of vineyards, cornfields, and banana plantations, while fruit trees filled the air with the sweet scent of cherry, orange, lemon, and guava blossoms during the spring. However, beneath Tábua's serene beauty beat a heart well acquainted with the hardships of rural life in those times. Rosa had been born and raised in one of those houses, a simple home with low ceilings and thick walls, but filled with love and warmth. Since she was little, Rosa had been the pride of her family, with black hair that fell in soft waves over her shoulders and bright eyes that always reflected her cheerful spirit. Rosa was known by everyone in Tábua for her kindness and her infectious laughter. However, she was also known for her free and dreamy spirit. She could often be found helping out in the fields or lying among the wildflowers, imagining a world full of adventures and impossible loves, far from the hard and predictable life she led on the island. It was during one of those walks that Rosa saw Francisco for the first time. He was standing by the river, his pants rolled up and his bare chest under the sun as he filled jugs with fresh water to take home. Francisco, like many other young men on the island, was forced to work from a very young age to help his family. However, instead of the hardness that life had imposed on him, Rosa saw something else in him. Maybe it was the way the sunlight reflected in his blue eyes, or how his dark hair fell messily over his forehead. But something about Francisco caught her attention. He was tall, sturdy, with an air of strength and resilience that he couldn't hide. But his eyes, though stern, concealed a pain that Rosa could not ignore. Rosa and Francisco began to see each other in secret. At first they were just casual encounters at Sunday Mass or at the local market, exchanging shy smiles and brief words under the watchful eyes of their elders. But soon those smiles turned into furtive conversations, and those conversations into promises of a future together. Francisco would invite her to walk by the river, to sit on the rocks where the water flowed with a constant murmur, a secluded place that became their refuge. In those moments, Francisco revealed glimpses of the man he truly was, someone who longed for something beyond the life he had been given, but who was trapped by family responsibilities and social expectations. However, Rosa's love for Francisco was not well received by her family. Rosa's mother, a woman who had known stability and respect in her marriage, could not accept that her daughter, whom she had raised with such care, had fallen in love with a man like Francisco. He came from a working-class family, known for their financial struggles and daily fight to get ahead. He was not the man they had dreamed of for Rosa. Her father, a man of few words but firm decisions, was the first to confront her. "Rosa, this cannot go on," he told her one night as the family ate dinner in silence around the wooden table, lit only by the light of an oil lamp. "Francisco is not suitable for you. He has nothing to offer you. You deserve more, a better life, someone who can take care of you and give you stability just as we have done." But Rosa couldn't ignore what she felt. Every word from her father felt like a weight on her heart, but at the same time she knew she couldn't give up Francisco. What they had between them was real as the air she breathed, and as necessary as the water from the levadas that nourished the fields. Despite her fears, she knew she had to follow her heart, even if that meant breaking away from everything she knew. The arguments in Rosa's house became more frequent and tense. Her father, seeing his daughter's stubbornness, finally gave her an ultimatum. She had to choose between her family or Francisco. Rosa spent entire nights awake thinking about her future, with silent tears soaking her linen pillow. She knew that her decision would not only affect her own life, but also that of her parents, who had sacrificed so much for her. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Francisco's face, his intense gaze that promised her a different world, one where she would be loved for who she was and not for what she represented. One early morning, before the sun peeked over the horizon, Rosa made her decision. She got out of bed with a heavy heart, but with determination. She packed her few belongings into a small leather suitcase that had belonged to her grandmother. The house was silent. Only the creaking of the wood beneath her bare feet could be heard. She paused for a moment at the door, taking one last look at the home where she had grown up. Her mother and father were sleeping in the next room, unaware of what was about to happen. With one last sigh, Rosa left the house and closed the door behind her. She walked through the empty streets of Tábua toward the river where Francisco was waiting for her. The morning air was cool and the sky was beginning to be tinged with the first rays of light. Rosa felt the weight of uncertainty with every step she took, but also the freedom of following her own path. When she arrived at the river, Francisco was there, standing next to the rock where they had so often sat together. When he saw her, a mixture of relief and fear crossed his face. He knew what her arrival meant. They were about to start a new life, but they were also leaving behind everything they knew. "Are you sure?" Francisco asked her in a low voice, reaching out his hand to her. Rosa nodded, gripping his hand tightly. "Yes, I'm sure," she replied, knowing there was no turning back. Together they crossed the river and entered the forest that surrounded Tábua. The path was uncertain, but for the first time Rosa felt she was taking control of her life, even if her destination remained a mystery. As they moved forward, the echo of their footsteps on the damp earth resounded in the silence like a prelude to the story they were about to write. Thus began the new life of Rosa and Francisco, a life full of challenges, sacrifices, and above all, love. And although distance and hardships would separate them from the world they once knew, their roots in Tábua would remain a part of them, an echo that would resonate throughout their lives and in the lives of those who would follow them. This first chapter marks the beginning of an epic about roots, sacrifice, and the struggle for love and identity, a legacy that will cross generations and geographies like an echo that never fades. Chapter 2. The Bitter Fruit of Love. The love between Rosa and Francisco soon bore its first fruit. Just a few months after joining together in that act of rebellion, Rosa discovered she was carrying a new life in her womb. Despite the poverty, the exhaustion, and the physical pain from endless days of work, that news filled her with hope. When Francisco found out, he showed a barely perceptible smile, a mixture of pride and concern. He was going to be a father. Francisco, the firstborn, was born amid the sighs of a brave mother and within the walls of a poor but dignified home. After his arrival came Maria, Angela, Victor, Manuel, Jose, and Alfredo. One after another, the children filled the small home, bringing with them childish laughter, new dreams, and also more mouths to feed. But with each passing day, Rosa began to discover a harsher side of her husband. Francisco was changing. The young man with the dreamy gaze who used to make her laugh by the river became a harsh man, with an explosive temper, rough words, and even more painful actions. When he was hungry, the whole house trembled. No one could sit at the table before him. No one was allowed to chew if his plate was still empty. "I am the provider," he would shout, his eyes wild. "Me first, then everyone else." The love Rosa had idealized withered away amid shouting, silence, humiliation, and blows. What her parents had warned her about long ago became her daily reality. Even so, she endured it for her children, out of fear, out of habit, for that remnant of hope that still lived in her heart. Tragedy was not long in knocking at her door. One of her daughters, just a little girl, died after being struck with a stone while playing near the sea. They said it was an accident, but in Rosa's heart, doubt and pain mingled like a wound that never healed. Later, she lost a baby, the result of a beating she received while pregnant. Her body fell to the ground like a broken branch, and with it, the heartbeat of a life that would never see the light of day. And yet, Rosa stayed. She lived between poverty and resignation. She became a mother, nurse, cook, protector, and shield. But little by little, her soul began to wear down. Francisco, the eldest son, couldn't take it anymore. He was just a teenager, but the shouting, the fights, the hunger, and the hopelessness pushed him to look for a way out. One day, without saying goodbye, he left home. He preferred the cold of the streets to the warmth of a home filled with pain. He lived as best he could, facing the world with the courage of someone who had already known too much suffering. When he came of age, Francisco made a decision that would change his destiny forever. He set out for Venezuela, a distant land that promised opportunities and a better life. It was a 15-day journey on a ship that smelled of salt, sweat, and broken dreams. When he arrived, he found a warm country, full of contrasts, where the accent was different, but hope felt familiar. There, Francisco put down roots. He worked hard, started a family, and gradually built a life he had never thought possible. Venezuela became his true home, his refuge, his new beginning. But even though his feet stood on different soil, the voices of his past, the whispers of his mother, and the echo of the mountains of Tábua never stopped accompanying him. Because there are wounds that travel with you, and loves that, no matter how much they hurt, remain etched in your blood. Francisco worked with determination from his very first day in Venezuela. He would get up before the sun and return, when the moon was already hanging over the Caribbean sky. He started out carrying sacks at the port, then worked in a warehouse, and later at a construction company that recognized his strength and perseverance. Over time he saved every penny, not just for himself, but with a greater purpose, to lift his loved ones out of the misery they knew all too well. First, he managed to bring one of his brothers over. Then, little by little, the others arrived. Maria, Victor, Manuel. One by one, they found a new beginning in Venezuela, far from the hardships that had marked their childhood. Francisco was the pillar, the eldest brother, the one who had paved the way through pain, but also through hope. When he finally had the means, he arranged for his parents' journey. Despite the burden he carried in his soul, he believed they deserved a chance at a better life. He got them a small house, food, comforts they had never had in Tábua. He fulfilled his duty. He offered them what he himself had never received, security and a decent roof over their heads. But living with them, that was another story. Every word, every gesture, every silence from his father took him back to his childhood. The emotional scars that had never healed hurt again as if they were still fresh. His love for his mother was still alive, but clouded by years of submission that she herself had never managed to break free from. The past was a permanent guest, one that left no room for closeness or forgiveness. Francisco offered them help, but not companionship. He gave them a roof, but he never returned home. It wasn't cruelty, it was self-protection. The child he once was still lived inside him, trembling in a corner of his memory, too wounded to embrace the reunion. This is how Francisco, in his new homeland, achieved what once seemed impossible, breaking a cycle, offering new possibilities, and planting a different legacy. But he also knew that there are wounds that, even when they heal, never disappear. His way of healing was through distance. His way of loving was the act of giving, even if he couldn't stay. Chapter 3. What Fate Cannot Erase. Life continued its course in Venezuelan lands, along with the stories of each of the brothers whom Francisco had helped escape poverty. One of them, Victor, had married Lorinda, a sweet young woman with calm eyes and a kind soul. Together they built a modest but happy family, where the laughter of their children filled the voids of the past, and the aroma of hot coffee at dawn was a reminder that peace was also possible, but that peace did not last long. Lorinda, while giving birth to their third child, died during labor. A case of medical malpractice sealed her fate and left Victor with a shattered soul and 3 little ones in his arms. It was a devastating blow. The woman who had rescued him from the sadness of his childhood, who had helped him build a new life, was no longer there. The days became long and heavy. Victor learned to dress his children with trembling hands, to cook the little he knew, and to hide his tears in the darkness of the night. But life, relentless and sometimes absurd, did not stop. Years later, following the advice of relatives and the customs of the time, he married again, this time to Lorinda's sister, a woman he had never met before, not even seen in person. The marriage was by proxy, as was customary in those days, sealed with papers and promises that did not come from the heart, but from necessity. When she arrived in Venezuela, the disappointment was immediate. Not because of her appearance or what she brought with her, but because inevitably Victor compared her to Lorinda, his true love, and she was not, nor could she ever be, even a shadow of what he had lost. Francisco was by his side throughout that entire process. He accompanied him through the loss, the mourning, the long silences, and the gray days. And it was in the midst of that companionship, between visits to Victor's house and family gatherings, that he met Maria Inés, a cousin of Lorinda, who had recently arrived from Madeira, specifically from the region of Ribeira Brava. Maria Inés was different. She spoke slowly, had a melancholic gaze, and a sweetness that contrasted with the harshness of the new world they were discovering. She too had fled Portuguese poverty like so many others, seeking not riches, but dignity. Venezuela, with its colors, its light, and its promise of opportunities, was a beacon for her. Francisco watched her from afar at first, but the pain they both carried, the uprooting they shared, and that deep feeling of not truly belonging to any land united them in a silent yet steadfast way. Their conversations were few but meaningful. Every gesture was stronger than words. Every glance was a bridge between their worlds. A short time later, Francisco asked for her hand in marriage. It was a simple act, but full of intention. It wasn't a fairy tale story. It was a conscious decision between two souls who knew what loss, poverty, and hard work were. They were married surrounded by a few family members in a modest but deeply intimate ceremony. And so, Francisco began to believe again that perhaps, amid so much inherited pain, there was still room to write a different story. From the love between Francisco and Maria Inés, 3 children were born. The first was Raimundo, who arrived in the world exactly 9 months after conception. His birth was difficult. Maria Inés, exhausted by a life of sacrifice and fragile health, struggled between pain and uncertainty. But against all odds, mother and child survived. Raimundo was welcomed with joy and hope. Some time later, Francisco was born, the second child, a boy with a strong character and a calm gaze. His arrival brought balance to the home, a sense of continuity, of life that, though hard, could still flourish. And finally, as an unexpected gift, the girl was born, Arelise, the father's joy. Francisco adored her, and in his eyes was reflected something that neither time nor pain could wither: tenderness. Francisco was always a hard-working man. There was never a lack of food at home. The roof was sturdy and the duties were always fulfilled. But as if he carried an ancient karma, money, though it came, slipped through his fingers. He had the habit of lending it, perhaps believing in the goodness of others, or wishing to help those who, like him once, had nothing. But much of that money never came back. Francisco lived losing. He lost opportunities, friendships, money. And although he hid it with work and effort, frustration always accompanied him, like a persistent shadow. His marriage to Maria Inés was not easy. How could it be? He came from a broken family history, from emotional deprivation and deep wounds that never healed. The home he built became filled with routines, silences, and at times, with shouts that hurt more than blows. The abuse was psychological, verbal, and, although to a lesser extent, also physical. Maria Inés endured what she could, not out of weakness, but for her children, out of fear, because she had nowhere to go, to avoid repeating an even crueler cycle. Her life was a string of sacrifices. She gave up her own dreams, the possibility of being more than just a wife and mother. Her world was the house, work, cleaning, a relentless routine. Laughter only appeared from time to time when she managed to visit her sisters. They too led humble lives without luxuries, but in their homes you could feel peace. And that, for Maria Inés and her children, was a breath of fresh air, a relief. The children grew up amid tension and hardship, but also among the small moments their mother guarded as if they were gold. A shared snack, an afternoon visit, a song softly sung while she cooked. Maria Inés didn't need luxuries to be a present mother. Despite everything, she was a refuge, she was a pillar. And although her days were marked by exhaustion and sacrifice, her heart kept beating for her children, the only true loves who never let her down. Chapter 4. In spite of everything, they flourished. The years passed amid sacrifices, quiet work, and an iron will to give her children a better life. Maria Inés, her body weary, but her soul alight with maternal love, accompanied them every step of the way. It was not easy. There were many financial hardships, and the country no longer offered the same promises as before. But she did not give in. Raimundo, the eldest, showed a natural inclination for studying from a young age. Disciplined, methodical, and with an insatiable curiosity, he was the first to make it to university. Maria Inés, with tears in her eyes and her heart about to burst with pride, watched him receive his first diploma. In that moment, she knew that everything had been worth it. Francisco, on the other hand, had a more restless spirit. The classroom was not his place. He was more about the streets, about practical experiences, about learning by doing. He finished high school with effort, but soon realized that his path would not be through books, but through action, in real life. Maria Inés did not judge him. She accepted him just as he was and supported him in every decision, because she knew that success does not have only one form. Arelis, the beloved daughter, also made it to university. Intelligent, sensitive, tenacious. In her, Maria Inés saw her own strength reflected, the same strength she had so often had to hide in order to survive. Every achievement of Aurelis was a balm for the soul of a mother who, though exhausted, never stopped believing in her children. They were hard years, years without sleep, with bills to pay, hand-me-down clothes, and meals stretched thin. But they were also years of resilience, of small achievements that together became a greater victory. Each one, in their own way, was building their own life. Raimundo was the first to pave the way. With determination and courage, he left for another country in search of stability and a future. He didn't leave running away, he left planting seeds. Sometime later, Francisco, now with his own family, made the same decision. He left with his loved ones to join his brother, understanding that sometimes destiny is woven together, as if the steps of those who share blood follow the same path. Years later, Arilis also set out on the journey, but she did not go alone. She was accompanied by a beautiful daughter, her smile and skin painted with the sun, a new promise of continuity, of light, and of hope. Following the path her siblings had opened, she crossed borders with a divided heart, but with the determination inherited from her mother, and Maria Inés was left behind for a while. The house became quieter. The walls held on to laughter that no longer echoed in the hallways, and the table seemed far too big for just one person. But even though distance surrounded her, she was never alone. Every call, every photograph sent from distant lands, every word from her children, was confirmation that love knows no borders. A couple of years went by. The children, now settled, realized that their story was not complete without her. Maria Inés was not just their mother. She was the origin, the invisible support, the root that gave them the strength to cross oceans. And one day they went to get her. It wasn't just any trip, it was an act of gratitude, of recognition, of deep love. The woman who had supported them when the world seemed to fall apart was now being supported by those she had taught to walk. And so the three children took her with them, not as a burden, but as the most precious treasure they possessed. Maria Inés also crossed borders, leaving behind memories, neighbors, familiar streets, but carrying with her something more powerful than any land, the certainty of having fulfilled her mission. And together they began a new life in a new place, among different people, with other accents and other customs. Not everything was easy. Adapting never is. But there was something that never changed, the love that united them. The heart of that family, far from being divided, expanded. And they understood that it doesn't matter where life is planted. When love is the root, there will always be hope. They blossomed. True roots are not in the land we walk on, but in the love that shaped us. A mother who sows with sacrifice does not lose when her children leave. She multiplies her legacy. And the children who emigrate do not abandon their origins. They carry them within, turning them into strength to start anew. Because to blossom does not mean to stay where we were born. To blossom means to carry our roots with dignity, to honor the past, and to build a future without forgetting who we are. And it also means to be grateful to those who walked before us, to those who gave up their own dreams to support ours, to those who in silence bore the weight so that we could fly lighter. Gratitude is the bridge between generations. It is the purest way to recognize that nothing we are was born alone, because where there has been love, sacrifice, and gratitude, there will always be new life, no matter the country, the distance, or the time. And those who live with gratitude never lose their roots. They simply make them blossom in any land.